Paul, a bondservant of Christ Jesus, called as an apostle, set apart for the gospel of God, which he promised beforehand, through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures, which he promised beforehand through his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to take you back 2,000 years or so, or even much more, and I'm going to introduce you to a person by the name of Elior. You see, Elior is my name, and I am a servant, and I work for the king. In the king's kingdom, and my family has always worked for the king. My father worked for the king, my grandfather worked for the king, my great-grandfather worked for the king, my great-great-great-grandfather worked for the king. Many generations have worked for the king. We are all servants, and I should tell you that my name is actually defined, Elior. If you look it up, E-L-I-O-R, you look it up, it actually means God is light, or light of God, and I think there has something to do with the fact of why I'm talking to you today. And so we've worked, and there's something that's going on in our kingdom here recently, and what's been happening is that we've been waiting. You see, there's this promise that was made a while back, and we have been waiting. The promise was made to my great-great-great-grandfather. The promise was made all the way down to my grandfather, to my father, and then to my generation. There was this promise that was made, and we have been waiting. And it's not just me or my family that's been waiting, but it's actually our entire culture. Everybody around is waiting for this promise that was made, and that we were hoping that this promise would be kept. You see, because one of the problems is, I don't know about you, but I do not like it when promises are broken. When somebody makes a promise to me, I want it actually to take place. I want it to happen. But this has really been gnawing at all of us because we've been waiting for a very long time. It's been generations that we've been waiting. And I must tell you that the whole idea of waiting has never been something that I like. I don't appreciate it. I don't like the idea of waiting. Those of you who are listening to me maybe 2,000 years in the future, maybe you don't understand this, but see, in our culture, we don't like waiting. See, we actually have to do this thing where we go down to the temple, and we have to pay this temple tax, and we have to deal with the money changers. They inspect our money, and they always find something wrong with our money or the way that we do it, and they always send it back and ask us to fix it, and then it goes from the money changers, and then the scribes have to put it down accurately just to make sure, and we have to go through this every year. We have to go and we have to stand in line waiting just to simply pay our taxes. But the good news is, here's the good news. The good news is I've been hearing whispers around the kingdom. I've been hearing whispers that the leaders, the current leaders we have today, are saying they're going to fix this broken tax system. So for those of you who are listening to me 2,000 years in the future, I am so glad you will not have to worry about this. So we've been waiting, and we've been waiting. And I must tell you about another fellow servant, and he's really not a fellow servant to the point that he's one of my peers. He's actually somebody much older than me, and that everybody respects him. His name is Tobis, T-O-B-I-S. Tobis is his name, and everybody respects Tobis because when he speaks, he says very little, and he speaks with a lot of wisdom. And I remember one day he was talking to me, and his health was declining. And he clutched me on my arm, and he said, "Elior, never forget. Do not give up. Do not stop waiting. The promise will come." Those words have stuck with me. my whole life at this point. Because I can't tell you how often I've wanted to stop and I've wanted to give up waiting because a promise was made and it actually never came to fruition. It's never taken place. And we're talking generations. We're not talking just one lifetime. We're talking multiple lifetimes of waiting. And my patience, my impatience, I'm coming. When is this actually going to happen? And people around our culture are getting frustrated. Many of them are frustrated. Many of them are saying this is never going to happen. I give up. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going through with this. This isn't going to happen. Why are we even wasting our time? Why bother waiting? And then we received word one day. The king, he was up to something. And the king spoke. And I don't know about you and your culture, but in our culture, when the king spoke, everybody listened and everybody paid attention and hung on his every word, everything that he had to say. And the amazing thing was that he didn't even have to stand before a multitude in order for what he had to say to be heard. You see, all he had to do was just say one person to his assistant or to one of us servants, and somehow word spread around the kingdom and around the whole culture like wildfire. It was like it went viral, as you guys know, in 2,000 years in the future. You know what viral means. We don't know what that means yet. In our culture, it means we're going to die of some disease. But in your culture, it means communication is going to be going rapidly and quickly, and everybody's going to hear it. But see, we didn't need it to go viral. It just kind of happened. We told the servant because it was something the king said. Everybody knew it, and everybody paid attention, and everybody wanted to hear what it was that the king had to say. And what he had to say was this: do not disturb me. And he slammed the door of his quarters. And that slam echoed all throughout the entire kingdom. You see, because it was normal for the king to ask for privacy. It was normal for the king to say, don't bother me right now. We understand that he needs this. But what was different about this was days became weeks, and weeks became months. And we were thinking, what in the world is the king doing? And so many of us, as his servants, we would go up to the door of his quarters and we would try to listen in on what is he doing. He's never been in this do not disturb mode this long before. And all we could hear was the quill of his pen on the parchment, scratching, and then pausing for a few minutes, and then scratching more, and then pausing for a few minutes, and then scratching more, and then pausing. And we're thinking, he's writing. The king is writing something. And so because he's writing something, whatever this king is working on, which is from days and weeks and months, which has never been this long before, we know it's going to be something powerful. We know it's going to be something real. And then it happened. The announcement was made. And everybody knew when it was going to take place. The announcement was made that the king was going to come and address everyone. So all of us were ready. All of us knew this was going to take place. Finally, after waiting this long, and it wasn't just the days and the weeks and the months, but we're all thinking, this is finally the answer. This is finally the promise that was made to us. This is finally the promise that was made from generation to generation to generation to generation, and now down to us. We're finally going to get the promise. It's going to be unveiled in an incredible, dramatic way, as only the king can. So we were all there, ready. And we waited, and waited, and waited. And you know what happens when you wait? When you wait, you start to think of what can you do while you're waiting. So the kids began to play. And the kids they started playing ball off to the side. And then some adults started playing over here and started talking amongst themselves. And there were food trucks available for us, by the way. We had food trucks, amazing food trucks that were just to help us get through this time. And then finally, the head assistant to the king, the head servant comes out and announces, here is the king. And everybody was silent. Everybody stopped playing. Food trucks stopped serving. Everybody stopped eating. Because we knew whatever the king had been working on for days and weeks and months had to be something real. This is it, finally. The answer our people have been waiting for years. This is it. So the king comes up. And he's holding what he wrote all this time. And when he comes up, we're all hanging on his every word. And he starts off by simply saying, many of you know I've been working on this. Many of you know I told you not to disturb me. But I want to tell you I have been working on the most important message you will ever hear for a lifetime. This is the message that's going to be the answer that generations before us waited for. And now today I am declaring to you. And then he pulled it on us. This was almost like a bait and switch. He held it up and he said, you see, this is what I've been working on. And it was the nice envelope, as you can see here, and it had his seal on it. And we're all ready for the king to break the seal. And then he comes out with this last statement and he says, but it will not be open today. We don't like waiting. That's it. It will not be open today. And then he followed it. Some, I don't think, kept listening. Some stopped listening after he said that. But I kept listening, and he actually said, but trust me, you must wait. And you must not forget. You must wait and understand that this promise will be fulfilled. Do not question whether it will be fulfilled or not. Then he walked back to his quarters. And he took this with him. We were all standing there in shock and awe, not knowing what to do. There was one group of people over here, they were weeping. But it wasn't that kind of weep where they were sad. They were weeping for the fact that there was a promise that was going to be fulfilled. These were the people that they were still hanging on to the promise. They were still there. They were still grasping at it. And they knew that even though it didn't happen that day and they were disappointed, they still hung on that they were going to experience this incredible promise that has been foretold for multiple generations. And then there was a group over here, and what they were doing, they just simply shook their head and walked away and said, here we go again. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not. I have nothing to do with this. And I'm standing there not knowing what to think. And then I started to remember. There was something else Tobus said. You remember Tobus? He was the servant that clutched my arm and said, do not give up waiting. This is real. The one who had the most wisdom on all our entire kingdom and our whole culture, the one that everybody listened to when he spoke. There was something else. I couldn't even believe I forgot this until this moment. But I remembered something else that he said in that moment. It was actually his final words that he said to me. You see, while he clutched me, what happened was he was looking off in the distance, but when he looked off in the distance, it was as if he was watching something. It wasn't like it was just random and he was just looking around, but he was watching something as if somebody was giving him a message. And he told me, he said, Elior, this is what's going to take place. Listen to my every word, please. Listen, before I go, listen to this. He said, there's going to be something that's going to be added to our scriptures. You know our scriptures. I said, yes, I know the scriptures, but there's going to be something added to our scriptures. It's going to become known as the New Testament. And what the New Testament is going to be about? It's going to be about the Messiah who's going to come, who's going to give his life so that we can have eternal life with him. And that is the actual promise that we have been waiting for. And then he looked further into the future and he said, Elior, listen, he said, there's going to be a guy by the name of the Apostle Paul who's going to have an incredible testimony. He starts off as Saul. He's against the promise. He's against the Messiah. He's against everything that it stands for. But then he meets the Messiah and he has an incredible conversion experience, and he's going to sit down and write many letters to many churches, and one of them specifically is going to be to the church at Rome. And then, in a faint voice, he said to me, with tears in his eyes, he said, but Elior, you must understand something. He said, you know how in our culture people have stopped waiting? You know in our culture how people have given up faith? You know how people have grown impatient and they've walked away shaking their heads and saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to reject it. Trust me on this, Elior. Even when the day the Apostle Paul writes this, they're going to react the same way. In fact, Elior, from that point forward in the future, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have those who accept it, those who desire it, those who want it, but then you're going to have those that are going to say, nah, it's not for me. That even after he dies for everybody and conquers death, and even after that, we have an amazing conversion by a guy by the name of Saul becoming Paul. And he writes it down. And then it's mass-produced 2,000 years from now. There's going to be so many people having access to this truth. There's still going to be people, Elior, that are going to be walking away and rejecting it. And then he was gone. I've never forgotten those words. As usual, that's what happens. You never forget those last words somebody says to you when they're dying. But I must say to you today that if you're listening to this 2,000 years after the fact, and I must say to you today that 40 generations of this being unfolded, that God did not do this because he wanted to withhold it, but it was all planning and purpose of how he did it. And I must say to you, how in the world, after all of that, the crucifixion, the resurrection, conquering death, somebody like the Apostle Paul writing this message down, it being mass-produced so that everybody has access to it. How in the world could anybody ever reject this? And don't you see that if anybody ever rejects this, it makes all of our faith, all of our waiting, all of our perseverance is in vain. Why would you waste something like that? We're going to pray today together, and we're going to take communion. But while we take communion, we don't want this just to be a tradition. We don't want it to be a ritual. But while you take communion today, and this one time, could it be a statement? Could it be a statement that says, I am declaring that I am accepting this as truth, and I don't care what the critics say. I don't care what the others say. I don't care what the people say that are rejecting it. I don't care if anybody rejects it. But when I take communion, which represents his body and represents his blood, which is what Christianity is all about, all the generations leading up to this, that God unfolded this plan, it would be absolutely ridiculous for me not to say, I accept this promise that God has unfolded over generations. So the worship team is going to come up and they're going to lead us. Lord Jesus, we ask today, God, that you would be with us as we partake in this sacrament, and that you would remind us of what this time is for, that you would remind us to be the people that you want and have called us to be. And you would remind us of how much you love us, that through generations you brought this truth to us. How could we ever turn it away? How could we ever say it's not for me? How could we ever doubt? There's times, God, where you don't do what I think you should do. There's times, God, where I get a little impatient with you and I wonder, what are you waiting for, God? Forgive me for that today, God. Who am I to question your timing when you unfolded this over 40 generations? You did it all for me. How could I say it's not for me? Heads are bowed this morning. We're doing this communion different as we've done the last few times. We're not giving you the bread separate, but you are to come down and take the bread and the cup. And it doesn't matter to us what order you do this in, but I'm going to ask you something. I'm not going to ask you to stand. I'm going to ask you to come down and partake of this sacrament as you feel led. Because maybe you need to be praying just a little bit more before you rush into coming down and taking this. Maybe you need to say, God, search my heart and search my soul. Maybe you need to say, God, I'm sorry after everything you've done for me. How could I ever question? And maybe you should say, God, could I have the faith in order to be everything that you desire and want me to be? As we begin coming, they're going to start singing. Just as you feel led, come forward now and partake.